I was still at Grandpa's gate when the posted notice snapped in the wind, and I realized Karen had used a fake view rule to force our hedge down. She stood on her porch like she owned the block, bragging that the HOA had officially served the correction while the stumps bled sap along the fence. But when I pulled the expired landscaping permit from the city's archive, the whole thing flipped authority she claimed to wield had never been valid. "Not today," I said. Finally, someone fought back. The sound hit first. Brr! Trim. I froze halfway to the coffee maker. That wasn't a lawnmower. That was closer, sharper, like a chainsaw on a diet. It shuddered through the kitchen window straight into my spine. "Grandpa," I called. No answer. Another ripping pass. Brrr! Trim. I dropped the mug back in the sink and pushed through the sliding door onto the deck. They were already halfway done. 3 guys in neon vests and ear protection stood in Grandpa's backyard, a gas trimmer chewing through the hedge like it was made of paper. The thick green wall that had wrapped his yard for as long as I could remember was now a jagged line of shredded branches cut down to barely chest height. "Hey!" I shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" The guy with the trimmer let off the trigger. The engine coughed down to a sputter. Bits of leaf and mulch rained to the grass. Behind him, near the property line, stood Marla Kensington in a tailored navy blazer and sunglasses, arms folded like she was inspecting a job site she owned. Of course she was here. "Morning, Ethan," she said, like I'd just bumped into her at the grocery store. "We're taking care of a compliance issue." Grandpa was already outside, standing on the lower step of the deck, his slippers on wrong feet, pajama shirt half tucked. He looked small in a way I hated. "My hedge," he managed. "You're cutting my hedge." Marla didn't even flinch. She tipped her chin at the crew. "Per the notice, Mr. Henry received the hedge as obstructing the community lake view. We're restoring the view corridor." The word view landed like something thrown. I jumped off the deck and crossed the lawn. Up close, the damage looked worse. Branches that had once reached 6 feet high were hacked down to maybe 2 ragged stumps with bright green innards, exposed sap bleeding down like the hedge itself was wounded. "Shut it off," I said to the guy with the trimmer. "Right now." He glanced at Marla. She gave a tiny shake of her head, the kind that said she was used to people doing what she wanted. "Sir, we've got a work order from the HOA," the guy said. "We're just following the ticket." I stepped between him and the hedge. "Then, show me your permit." He blinked. "What? Your landscaping permit from the city?" I said. "HOA can't just start cutting tall vegetation without one. So either show me the permit or stop cutting." The trimmer guy looked to Marla again. She exhaled slowly, like I was a kid interrupting a meeting. "Ethan, don't make this adversarial," she said. "This is about community standards. The lake is an amenity. People pay to live here so they can see it, not stare at a wall of bushes." Behind me, the side gate creaked. Mr. McGill from 2 doors down slipped in a ball cap, shoved low hands tucked into his jacket. He watched silently, eyes on the shredded hedge. "Henry's hedge has been here for 15 years, I said. "Nobody complained when I was in high school and we played catch out here. Now, suddenly, it's a crisis." Marla tilted her sunglasses down just enough for me to see the irritation in her eyes. "We've had multiple complaints in the last year. The board voted to restore the original view corridor specified in the covenants. The notice went out yesterday." "Notice," Grandpa croaked. "What notice?" Marla pointed toward the fence. A bright orange paper was zip-tied to the chain link flapping in the breeze. I walked over and yanked it free. The plastic tie snapped with more effort than I expected. "View, Corridor Restoration, HOA, Landscaping Compliance," I read. "Work scheduled for 8 a.m. today." I looked at the timestamp at the top. The email copy field showed sent 9:04 p.m. the night before. "You gave him 11 hours, I said. "Most of which he was asleep." "That satisfies written notice," she replied. "And the board has authority over vegetation that interferes with community amenities. It's right there in the covenants." The notice crackled in my hand, the paper stiff and cheap. I scanned the bottom line. There, in blurry black, sat a signature labeled "Owner Consent, Henry Whitman." The font looked off. The loop of the H didn't match any check Grandpa had ever signed. "Grandpa, did you sign this?" I asked. He squinted at the page. The breeze pushed at his thinning hair. "I didn't sign anything," he whispered. No one came by. No one called. Marla shifted her weight. "Electronic consent is legally valid, Ethan." Mr. Whitman clicked agree in the portal. I looked at Grandpa. His tablet sat on the kitchen table most days, used for crossword puzzles and video calls. He could barely swipe the right way on a notification, never mind navigate the HOA portal, when I asked. She hesitated a fraction of a second before answering. "Last night. Which would be strange," I said, because he falls asleep watching baseball around 8 and his Wi-Fi drops out every time it rains. So, unless you personally walked over here with a stylus, I'm curious how he clicked agree. The trimmer guy shifted his feet, eyes flicking between us. McGill cleared his throat softly. "She's obsessed with that view," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. "Been talking about it at meetings for years." Marla snapped her head toward him. "This is not about me, Mr. McGill. This is about maintaining property values for everyone." I held up the notice between 2 fingers. The top edge fluttered. "You're saying my grandfather voluntarily agreed to let you cut down his privacy so somebody behind him can stare at the lake while they drink their morning coffee?" I asked. Just out of the goodness of his heart, color rose in her cheeks. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being specific. You hired a crew. You sent them onto his property with power equipment. You claim he consented. I'm telling you he didn't." I pointed at the hedge. "So again, show me your permit." The crew chief shifted his grip on the trimmer. "Ma'am, if the homeowners disputing stay on schedule," she snapped, "then to me, the association retains easement rights for compliance work. We don't need to argue this in the yard. If you have concerns, you're welcome to attend the next meeting and file an objection." My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "That's after the hedge is gone." Her smile returned thin and professional. "Then perhaps you should have read your mail sooner." Behind me, I heard Grandpa's breath catch. I turned. He was staring at the line of stumps, shoulders slumped, hands dangling at his sides like the air had been let out of him. "They never asked my consent," he said more to himself than anyone. "They just did it." The sound of leaves rustling in the light wind filled the silence. The hedge had always muffled the neighborhood noises. Now the street felt too close, every passing car a little louder, every voice from the sidewalk a little clearer than it should be. I stepped back to his side, still holding the notice. "This isn't compliance," I said quietly. "This is an agenda." He looked at me, eyes wet and tired. "What can we do, kiddo? They're the HOA." I folded the notice once hard enough to crease it. The orange paper cracked under my fingers. "Then I'll find out exactly how far their authority really goes," I said. "And who decided your hedge had to die so somebody else could have a better view?" "Maybe I broke some rule," Grandpa said. His voice was so small I almost missed it over the hiss of the coffee maker. He sat at the kitchen table, hunched over his mug, staring through the steam instead of drinking it. The light through the back window fell across his face and the new, brutal line of the hedge stumps beyond. "Maybe it's my fault," he added. "Maybe I should have trimmed them down sooner." I set my phone on the table a little harder than I meant to. "You didn't do anything wrong." He shrugged one shoulder. "They send papers. I don't always read them. Maybe they told me and I just—" He tapped his temple. "Forgot." On the wall beside the fridge hung the HOA bulletin board they'd given everyone when the subdivision was new. Little cork panel, Maple Grove logo at the top, neat pushpins holding old newsletters and holiday notices. The most recent flyer was crooked half-hanging from One Pin Community Lake, View Enhancement Plan. I crossed to it and tore the flyer down. The headline was all soft language preserving natural beauty shared enjoyment, but the middle paragraph made my jaw clench. "Selective removal of obstructive vegetation," I read out loud, "including but not limited to hedges, shrubs, and trees exceeding 6 feet which interfere with community view corridors." Grandpa winced like each word stung. "Sounds like me." "It sounds like they wrote it to sound like you," I said. "That's different." My phone buzzed. A text banner slid across the screen from Lisa. "Got your voicemail. Send me a photo of the notice and any emails. I need to see their permit situation. I snapped pictures of the crumpled orange notice and the email on Grandpa's ancient laptop, then forwarded everything. The laptop sat at the far end of the table screensaver, still bouncing the Maple Grove logo across a black background like some kind of slow, smug screensaver. "Let's see what the rulebook actually says," I muttered. I woke the laptop. The old hinges squeaked. Grandpa watched like I was defusing a bomb. "You don't have to," he said. "HOA always wins. They got more paper than I do. That's exactly why I'm looking," I said. "If they're going to hide behind paperwork, we're going to read every word." I clicked open the HOA portal. The login screen loaded slowly, bar inching across. Grandpa pointed at the password box. "I wrote it down somewhere," he said. "It's on one of those little yellow squares." The table was a graveyard of sticky notes, phone numbers, grocery lists, reminders in cramped, shaky handwriting. I shuffled through them until I found one taped to the bottom of the sugar jar, HOA site password, Shadow Lake 47. We logged in. The site beeped with a soft chime as the dashboard loaded. I navigated to Documents, then Covenants and Regulations, then opened the PDF labeled View Corridor Standard, Revision C. The laptop made a soft click as the file popped up. The document was 20-some pages. The first two were feel-good fluff about celebrating natural amenities. The rules were buried halfway down. "Here," I said, scrolling. "View Corridor Standard." The language was exactly what I expected, and worse than I'd hoped, reasonable enjoyment, harmonious sightline subject to board interpretation. Grandpa rubbed his temples. "See, they probably told me at a meeting. I don't always stay awake on Zoom. You falling asleep in front of a webcam doesn't give them a free pass to bulldoze your yard," I said. A knock sounded at the back door. I turned. Mr. Dotson from across the cul-de-sac stood there holding his ball cap in his hands. "Door was open," he said. "You got a minute, Henry?" "Yeah," Grandpa said, clearing his throat. "Come on in, Dot." Dotson shuffled inside and set his cap on the table. His gaze went immediately to the window. "Damn," he said softly. "They really did it." He looked at me. "Saw the crew trucks when I was taking the trash out. Thought I'd check on you. They said it's for the view corridor," I said. I couldn't stop the sarcasm from dripping off the words. Apparently his hedge offended the lake. Dotson let out a humorless little laugh. "She cut mine last year," he said. Same line. "You're blocking the view." I had a couple of pine trees by my back fence. Woke up to stumps and an invoice. "You fought it?" I asked. "Filed a complaint," he said. "Went to a meeting. They buried me in paragraphs. Quoted bylaws I'd never read in my life. By the time they were done, I felt like I'd painted my house neon green instead of planting trees." Grandpa looked from him to me. "HOA always wins," he told me again like it was settled law. My phone pinged. Email this time. I opened it. From Lisa Hall. Subject: "Got the docs," and the preview line. "We need to talk about permits." She answered. Grandpa asked. "Yeah," I said, scrolling as I read. "Where's the HOA's active landscaping operations permit?" I read it again, slower. My heartbeat kicked up a notch. She says, "Notice doesn't mention homeowner consent. That's bad enough. But the bigger question is, were they even allowed to have a crew out there at all?" Dotson frowned. "What do you mean, allowed?" "City requires special permits for bulk landscaping in common areas and for cutting vegetation over 6 feet," I said. HOA applied for a blanket one when they started fussing about the lake. Remember? They bragged about it in the newsletter. Dotson nodded slowly. Said it would streamline projects. I turned the laptop back toward me and searched the document index. Another PDF landscaping operations permit. Summary. Click. The file opened. A scan of a city form appeared, Maple Grove's name typed neatly across the top, dates stamped along the side. I scrolled to the bottom to the part in smaller text. Any alteration to private vegetation exceeding 6 feet in height requires both an active HOA landscaping operations permit and city sign-off, I read. Homeowner consent must be documented when work occurs on private lots. Grandpa frowned. "Say that again. They need two things, I said, an active permit from the city and your consent. On record, both. A quiet settled over the kitchen. The coffee machine hissed, then clicked off. Outside, a truck drove by slower than usual, the driver trying to get a look at the newly exposed yard. You didn't break rules, Grandpa, I said, looking up from the screen. They broke trust. And maybe they broke the law. He stared at the laptop, then at the hedge stumps out of the window, then back at me. So, what now? I picked up my phone again, thumbs already moving. Now, I ask Lisa a better question, I said. Not what they think the view corridor means. Not what the covenants say in page 10 fine print. I turned the screen so he could see the email I was drafting back. Now, we ask, I said, if Maple Grove HOA still has a valid landscaping operations permit at all. I hit send. The whoosh sounded loud in the small kitchen. Because if they don't, I added eyes back on the stamped dates at the bottom of the PDF, then they didn't just trim your hedge, they did it with no authority, and I'm willing to bet that permit's been expired for a while. Lisa didn't knock. She pushed through the back door with a gust of cold air and a thick folder under her arm. Ethan, she said breathless like she'd walked fast from the driveway. We have a problem. Or rather, she tapped the folder they do. Grandpa looked up from the table. He'd been staring at a crossword for 20 minutes without filling in a single box. Lisa set the folder down. Papers shifted with a soft shuffle. I ran the city registry this morning. Wanted to verify something before I called you. What I asked. She opened the folder, slid out a printed sheet, and pushed it across the table. Maple Grove HOA's Landscaping Operations Permit. The page looked official enough. City header permit ID dates stamped along the left margin. She tapped the bottom line with her pen. Expired, she said. Last July. Grandpa blinked. Expired. But they were just here. Exactly, Lisa replied. Without this permit, the HOA cannot touch private vegetation over 6 feet, especially not for aesthetic reasons like view enhancement. They're supposed to go through the city. They did not. I pulled the document closer. The word expired was in red angled across the signature block. So, cutting Grandpa's hedge was unauthorized, she said, and potentially subject to revocation of any future permits, which is why I came here instead of texting you back. The laptop on the table chimed with an email notification. I spun it around. The preview line made my stomach knot. From HOA, President, Marla Kensington. Subject, clarification on view. Corridor, work, I opened it. The tone was as dry as sandpaper. HOA acted under community view standards as outlined in our covenants. The work performed is within our authority to maintain visual harmony and preserve lake access enjoyment. Lisa let out a short, humorless laugh. She always writes like she swallowed a thesaurus. Grandpa leaned forward. So, they weren't allowed to do it, not even with the notice. Notice doesn't override city law, Lisa said. They need a valid permit to conduct any HOA-initiated vegetation work. View hazard, beautification doesn't matter. No permit, no authority. I flipped open the rest of her folder. Loose photocopies slid out snippets of the Municipal Landscaping Code, old HOA newsletters bragging about streamlined projects, screen captures of the city portal showing the permit status in glaring red. Look at this, Lisa said, pulling a tablet from her bag and loading the city portal again. The device beeped as it scanned her login. She zoomed into a block of text highlighted in yellow. Landscaping permit required for any HOA-initiated view enhancement. Required. Not optional. And definitely not retroactive. Grandpa sank back in his chair. So they didn't ask my consent, and they didn't have a permit. He rubbed a hand over his face. Why would they do that? Lisa didn't answer right away. She gathered the pages into a stack, smoothing the edges with practiced precision. When she finally looked up, her expression had sharpened. Because they assumed you wouldn't fight, she said. Most people don't. They bury them in jargon and hope no one checks the registry. I looked from her to Grandpa, then to the scarred view out the window hedge, stumps raw and pale against the morning light. "If they weaponize policy," Lisa said quietly, "we weaponize procedure." I held her gaze. This really could be revoked. Not just could, she said. If the city sees this evidence, the permit, if they try to renew it, won't survive review, and their last action goes on record as improper. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled down the street, its reflection glinting off the neighbor's windows that now had a perfect, unobstructed view of Grandpa's yard. "So, this wasn't a mistake," I said. "They didn't slip up." Lisa pressed her hand flat against the folder. "No," she said. "This was deliberate misuse of authority, and we're going to show the city exactly how deliberate it was." The diner was half empty, which was how Grandpa liked it. Vinyl booths cracked in the corners, the smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease that had seeped into the walls sometime in the 80s and never left. He wasn't with me now, though. It was just me and Lisa in a corner booth, my phone on the table between us, the hedge stumps still burned into my mind every time I blinked. "Call him," Lisa said. "Do it while the anger's still fresh." I stared at the number on the napkin. "What if he doesn't pick up?" "Then we leave a message," she said. "But I think he will. He signed half the city's permits. He cares when someone plays fast and loose with his name." I took a breath and hit the call button. The phone buzzed against the formica. On the third ring, a man picked up. "Inspector Turner," he said. His voice was low and patient, like he'd been dealing with contractors all morning. "Mr. Turner, this is Ethan Whitman," I said. "I'm calling about Maple Grove Estates HOA and any landscaping permits they might have filed this year." He paused. "That's specific." "My grandfather lives there," I said. "They cut his hedge down for a view corridor. We've already pulled the registry. Looks like their landscaping operations permit expired last July." Lisa watched me over the rim of her mug, eyes sharp. "You're asking if they renewed," Turner said. "I'm asking if they filed anything at all," I answered. "Renewal, new application, anything that would authorize them to have a crew cutting vegetation over 6 feet inside private lots." He sighed. I heard paper rustling, the faint click of a keyboard. Plates clattered somewhere behind me. The waitress shouted an order toward the kitchen. Neon from the sign out front flickered pink and blue over the chrome napkin holder. "No record," Turner said finally. "Nothing this calendar year. No renewal request on the landscaping operations permit. Last activity in that file is, hold on, more keys. Letter sent to Maple Grove HOA last August recommending renewal. No response logged. So they're operating on a dead permit," I said. "If they're operating at all," he said. "Officially, they're not authorized to enforce view corridor cuts with city backing. Any work like that is supposed to have both an active permit and individual homeowner sign-off." Lisa leaned closer, voice low. "Put him on speaker." I tapped the button. The phone beeped and Turner's voice filled the booth. Inspector Lisa said, "This is Lisa Hall. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Whitman informally at the moment. We have documentation of an HOA-initiated cut on his property over 6 feet for a stated lake view reason, no consent, and no active permit." "That about match your understanding of the law. It matches the requirements," he said. "Without a valid permit, the HOA is not authorized to direct contractors onto private lots for view enhancement. Safety hazards may be with immediate justification. Views, no." My chest loosened just enough for air to move again. So, when they told my grandpa HOA always wins. They were counting on no one checking the file, he said. Lisa nudged my elbow and mouthed, "Hearing." "What recourse do we have?" I asked. "Besides yelling at a meeting." "There's a process," Turner said. "You can request a public hearing with the Board of Adjustment regarding misuse or misrepresentation of a city permit. If you submit evidence that work was done under the claim of an active permit when none existed, the board can revoke, suspend, or restrict future permits." And the hedge. Grandpa's stumps flashed in my head, bright and brutal. "That's gone either way. I can't grow a hedge back," he said gently, "but I can make sure the record reflects what happened. And sometimes that's what keeps it from happening to the next guy." Lisa straightened. If we submit the notice, the expired permit, and a summary of the work, will the board consider it? They'll have to, Turner said. It's their job. File it under unauthorized landscaping action. CC. My office. He gave me an email address. I wrote it on the napkin, pressing the pen so hard it nearly tore the paper. Thank you, I said, for picking up. You're the first homeowner who's called me about Maple Grove, he said. That alone tells me a few things. Send the documents. Let the process work. We ended the call. The phone screen dimmed, reflecting the neon open sign in a wavering pink blur. Lisa blew out a breath. There it is, she said. Confirmation. They acted with zero authority. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the phone. So, now what? Now, she said, sliding out of the booth to grab her bag. We connect the dots in a way the city can't ignore. My phone buzzed again on the table. A notification from the Maple Grove Estates Facebook group lit up new post from HOA president. View corridor update. I opened it. There was a photo of the lake framed neatly between 2 yards. In the foreground, you could see the raw white line of Grandpa's hedge stumps. The caption read, "Improved sightline for all to enjoy." Comments were already under it, one from Dotson. "Looks great, but did Henry agree to this?" Another from some name I didn't recognize. "Are we allowed to request cuts like this?" As I watched, Dotson's comment vanished. The post flickered refreshed, and his line was gone, like it had never existed. "She's deleting anything that doesn't clap for her," I said. Lisa leaned over my shoulder, lips pressed thin. "Good," she said. "Screenshots make great exhibits." I grabbed the image and the comment thread, catching the little "This comment has been removed" system note before it disappeared too. The soft tap-tap of my thumb on the screen sounded almost like a tiny hammer. "No permit means no authority," Lisa said. "And now we've got the city's own inspector on record saying it." We spent the rest of the coffee making a list on the back of the placemat documents. Dates, witnesses, statements. When we were done, there was more ink than white space. By the time we got back to Grandpa's, the sun was low and the hedge line threw long broken shadows across the grass. He sat in his recliner, the TV on mute remote forgotten in his hand. "You were gone a while," he said. "Diner," I said. "We called the city. We talked to Inspector Turner." His eyes sharpened a little at the name. "That the fellow with the mustache? He did our sewer hookup in '09. Same guy I said." I pulled my phone out and opened the new email in my inbox. Public hearing. Unauthorized landscaping action date, May 14th. Location, Fort Collins City Hall. Subject, Maple Grove Estates, HOA, Landscaping Operations Permit. I handed him the phone. His hand shook a little as he read. They're going to talk about this," he asked. "In public. They're going to hear it," I said. "On the record. With your name spelled right and the word expired where it belongs." He swallowed hard. "Do what I couldn't, son." "What's that?" I asked. "Look 'em in the eye when they push," he said. "I just let 'em push." I glanced past him through the window at the slice of lake now visible between 2 bare spots of hedge. It gleamed in the evening light, calm and pretty, like it hadn't just been used as an excuse to strip a man's privacy. "They wanted a view," I said. "Fine. Now everyone gets to watch the truth." City Hall was already full when we walked in, packed tight with neighbors, board members, and people who'd clearly rearranged their morning just to see someone finally hold the HOA accountable. The room felt charged bright under rows of LED panels, as if the place had been prepped for a televised town hall. Grandpa hesitated at the doorway until I guided him forward. Lisa moved ahead of us with calm precision. "Stay focused," she said quietly, "and don't rise to anything they throw at you. Let them sink themselves." We took seats at the table, labeled applicant. Across the aisle, Marla Kensington was already seated with 2 board members. She wore a blazer stiff enough to look armored. The moment she saw us, her jaw locked in a thin, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. A sudden mic squeal cut through the room. Inspector Turner leaned toward the dais microphone and tapped it twice, the sound echoing sharply. "Next item," he said. "Case 2419. Allegation of unauthorized landscaping action conducted by Maple Grove Estates." Homeowners Association. Grandpa's hand trembled on the table. I set mine over his steady. The projector at the back of the room clicked. A slide lit up the wall, the city seal bold text beneath it, and one word stamped in bright red across the center. Expired. The murmurs started immediately. Lisa stood and moved to the podium. When she spoke, her voice was steady, crisp. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. This is not simply a disagreement over a hedge. This is about authority and what happens when a governing body exceeds it." She tapped a remote. The slide changed to a photo of Grandpa's hedge before the cut. Thick green, a soft barrier of privacy. Another tap after photo, the stumps, the exposed yard, the lake, glaring through like a wound. On March the 3rd, she continued. Maple Grove Estates, HOA, entered Mr. Whitman's property and reduced his hedge to under 2 feet. They claimed this was necessary to restore a community lakeview corridor. But the law is clear: for any HOA to alter vegetation over 6 feet in height for view enhancement, they must possess a valid landscaping operations permit. She pointed at the red stamp. This one expired 11 months before the cut. Marla slammed her mic button. We acted within our covenants. Community members pay premiums for that lake view. Turner raised a hand. Ms. Kensington, you'll have an opportunity to respond. Please allow Ms. Hall to finish. Lisa moved on without blinking. The notice sent to Mr. Whitman was time-stamped 9:04 p.m. the night before work began and contained no mention of homeowner consent. There was no documentation of an active permit, no city sign-off, and yet the HOA represented themselves as authorized. Another slide, the orange notice zip-tied to Grandpa's gate. Blown up that large, it looked even more reckless. Lisa tapped again. A screenshot appeared, Marla's Facebook post, improved sightline for all to enjoy. Under it, a faint gray phrase. Some comments may have been removed. The room rumbled. You do not get to create authority by posting it online, Lisa said. Policy is not law. Marla hit her mic again. Residents have been begging us to open that lakeview for years. We acted for them. Turner slid a document across the dais. Ms. Kensington, is this your signature on the landscaping work order? She stiffened. Of course. I've signed dozens. And did you confirm the permit status before ordering this work? Silence. Turner repeated the question slower. Did you check whether your permit was valid? It was being renewed, she said finally. He held up another sheet. The city registry shows a renewal notice sent last August with no response. No application, no fee, no renewal. Your HOA allowed the permit to lapse. A man behind us muttered, "Typical." Turner turned back to Lisa. Proceed. She clicked again, zooming into a highlighted line of municipal code. Any HOA-initiated vegetation reduction exceeding 6 feet in height for view enhancement requires an active landscaping operations permit and documented homeowner consent. Maple Grove met neither. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Grandpa swallowed hard. His voice shook. All I ever wanted was privacy, he whispered. Lisa rested a hand briefly on his shoulder before facing the dais again. Mr. Whitman's rights were violated by a board acting without proper authority, she said. This wasn't compliance. This was overreach. Turner studied the screen, then the papers in front of him. His expression shifted professional, controlled, but heavy with disapproval. Ms. Kensington, he said, do you dispute that the permit was expired? She hesitated again. We believed. That's not the question. Her voice thinned. No. Do you dispute that the hedge was cut without homeowner consent? Silence. No, she said quietly. Turner exhaled through his nose. Then, based on the evidence, this board finds that Maple Grove Estates HOA acted without authority. The April 3rd landscaping operation was unauthorized. The room erupted gasps, whispers, a short bark of disbelief from someone near the aisle. Grandpa looked stunned, as if the weight he'd carried for weeks had shifted slightly off his shoulders. Marla's composure cracked. You can't just say that she said. We were maintaining community standards. No, Turner said. You were violating municipal code." He tapped the gavel, once sharp final. "This board will recess to consider revocation of Maple Grove Estates landscaping operations permit and any conditions placed on future applications." The gavel struck again. 10-minute recess. People immediately stood the chamber buzzing like a disturbed hive. Some looked at Grandpa with sympathy, some with a kind of quiet admiration. Across the aisle, Marla sat frozen, her face tight and pale. Grandpa turned to me with tears in his eyes. I didn't think anyone would listen. I squeezed his hand. They are now, and for the first time since that awful morning in the yard, it felt true. When they filed back into the room, everything went quiet. It was the kind of silence you normally only get at funerals or verdicts. Conversations died mid-sentence. People slid back into benches. A cough here, a rustle there, then nothing but the sound of shoes on tile as the Board of Adjustment took their seats on the dais. I felt Grandpa's hand searching for mine on the table. I closed my fingers around his. They were cold. Lisa leaned in close enough that only we could hear her. "If they revoke it," she whispered, "Maple Grove loses all landscaping authority. No more view corridor cuts, not without going through the city like everyone else." Grandpa swallowed. "You really think they'll do it?" he asked. She looked up at the dais where Inspector Turner was straightening a stack of papers. "They like their laws clean," she said. "Right now, the HOA has left fingerprints all over theirs." Turner tapped his microphone. The little green light blinked on and the speakers hummed softly. "Please take your seats," he said. "We're back in session for Case 2419. The room settled. Even the air felt like it was waiting. He took a moment, eyes scanning the pages in front of him, pen tracing lines we couldn't see. I watched his fingers, the way he handled the paper, deliberate, careful, like the weight of what he was about to say mattered to him. After reviewing the evidence, he began including the city permit registry, the HOA's own documentation and testimony provided today. This board has reached a decision. Grandpa drew in a sharp breath. First, Turner said we find that Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association acted without authority when it directed contractors to cut Mr. Whitman's hedge for view enhancement purposes. At the time of the work, the HOA's landscaping operations permit had expired and no renewal or new application was on file. No homeowner consent was documented. He looked up, then, eyes finding Grandpa at our table. "That is not a minor oversight," he said. "That is a serious violation of both municipal code and basic trust." Across the aisle, Marla sat, straight-backed, hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. The two board members beside her avoided looking at anyone. Second, Turner continued, "We find that the HOA misrepresented its authority to Mr. Whitman by citing view corridor standards while lacking the legal foundation to enforce those standards through landscaping action." He picked up a heavier sheet of paper from the stack. Under the bright chamber lights, I could see the city logo embossed at the top, the official language printed in tight, neat lines. Beside him, the clerk slid a large wooden stamp pad closer along with a thick-handled stamp. "Maple Grove's council is not present today," he said, "but the HOA was properly notified of this hearing. Ms. Kensington, you are here as its president. Is there anything further you wish to add before the board issues its order?" Marla's throat worked. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed to be searching for words instead of reaching for them. "We acted in good faith for the community," she said, voice strained. "People bought those homes for lake access and views. We were trying to maintain what they paid for." Turner nodded once. "Good faith is a fine thing," he said. "But good faith doesn't replace compliance. When you govern, you don't get to substitute your intentions for the law." A ripple of approval moved through the benches behind us. He set the page down, flat, lifted the stamp, and positioned it over a blank space at the bottom of the document. For a second, everything in the room seemed to lean forward with it, every stare, every held breath. "The city of Fort Collins," he said, voice firm, "now hereby revokes the Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association Landscaping Operations Permit. Effective immediately." The stamp came down with a heavy final thud. It echoed off the chamber walls louder than any gavel. People flinched. Someone in the back said, "Damn," under their breath. I felt the sound in my chest. Furthermore, Turner went on the HOA is prohibited from applying for a new landscaping permit for a period of 12 months. Any future application will be subject to heightened review. During this time, they may not direct contractors to perform view enhancement cuts on private lots under the guise of HOA authority. Any such action will be considered a separate violation. The man behind us let out a low whistle. Another neighbor actually clapped once before catching himself. Marla stared at the stamped page like it was a personal insult. Her cheeks had gone a mottled red. "This is excessive," she said hoarsely. "You're punishing the entire community because one man refused to follow standards. Those hedges were ugly. Everyone knows it." A couple of heads turned sharply at that, eyes narrowing. Turner fixed her with a level stare. "No," he replied. "We are holding a governing body accountable for stepping outside its lane. Community standards don't give you permission to ignore permits and walk over people." He glanced down the bench at his fellow board members. They nodded, one after the other, like the decision had already been settled long before he spoke. "This order will be entered into the public record," he said. "Mr. Whitman, you'll receive a copy by mail. A copy will also be sent to the HOA and to the city's legal department." Grandpa's grip on my hand suddenly tightened, then loosened as he wiped at his eyes with the back of his wrist. "I never thought," he whispered, "not once, that someone would stand up for me like this." I swallowed against the lump in my throat. "You deserved it," I said. "You always did." Lisa sat back, a small satisfied smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You stood up too," she said softly to him. "You came here. You told the truth. That matters." The room buzzed now, not angry but energized. I heard snippets of conversation drifting around us. "About time somebody checked those people. They did what to his hedge. Can they do that to my trees too? Guess not anymore." Turner tapped the microphone once more. "One final note," he said. "This board recommends that Maple Grove Estates HOA review its governance practices, particularly around disclosure of conflicts and use of expired authorizations. Today is a reminder that rules exist to protect residents, not just property values." He rapped the gavel lightly. "Case 2419 is concluded." The green light on the mic clicked off. People began to stand, stretching, talking in earnest now. Grandpa stayed seated, staring at the dais at the spot where the stamp had hit the paper. The redness in his eyes wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was something like relief, raw and fragile. I squeezed his shoulder. "It's not over," I said. "They took your hedge. We got their permit. Now we rebuild." He looked up at me, and for the first time since the crew stepped into his yard, there was a spark there that didn't look like fear. He asked. "Yeah," I said. "Wishy, you're not doing any of this alone again." The apology letter arrived on a cool Saturday morning, tucked neatly inside a white HOA envelope with the board's crest embossed across the front. Grandpa placed it on the kitchen table as if it might vanish if handled too quickly. I slid it open and read the first line out loud. "The board of Maple Grove Estates formally apologizes for the unauthorized removal of Mr. Whitman's hedge and has approved compensation for restoration." Grandpa blinked slowly. "I never thought I'd see the day," he murmured. A second sheet followed an offer to reimburse replacement costs, plus a note that the board had voted to remove Marla Kensington from the HOA presidency, effective immediately. Grandpa let out a breath he'd been carrying for weeks. By late afternoon, the backyard was filled with neighbors Dotson McGill, even the couple from the corner lot who rarely spoke to anyone. They brought gardening gloves and thermoses of coffee, offering quiet nods that said more than any speech could. Lisa arrived right behind them with a bundle of new saplings strapped in the back of her SUV, their narrow trunks wrapped in burlap. The sun was dropping low, throwing warm gold across the yard and illuminating the raw line where the old hedge had been butchered. Grandpa stood at the edge of it, hands in his pockets, shoulders sloped. "I just wanted my hedge," he said softly. "Not trouble." I rested a hand on his back. This wasn't trouble, I told him. This was justice. The first thunk of a shovel broke the silence. Dirt loosened easily in the soft light, and the sound of metal hitting soil carried across the yard like a promise. One by one, holes formed in a straight row along the old boundary. Neighbors worked in quiet rhythm, dig, lift, pat down, while the scent of fresh earth rose around us. Lisa knelt beside Grandpa and offered him a sapling no taller than her shoulder. "Whenever you're ready," she said. He hesitated, looking down at the fragile thing. The leaves fluttered gently as if uncertain of their new home. Then he took it, cradling the stem with both hands, and stepped toward the first open hole. His knees bent slowly. He lowered the sapling into place, fingers trembling as he pressed the soil around its base. When he finally leaned back, the small tree stood upright, catching a sliver of sunlight on its bright new leaves. Neighbors paused their work. Someone murmured, "Looks good." "Henry," another said, "right where it belongs." Grandpa's eyes glistened, but this time the tears weren't born of shock or humiliation. They were something softer, edges smoothed by relief. "You did this," he whispered. "We all did," I said, "and you're the one who gets to watch it grow." As the line of saplings filled in 9, 10, 11, Grandpa moved more confidently, patting down the soil with a sure hand. Each new tree felt like a piece of his life being put back where it always should have been. The sky shifted toward orange shadows stretching across the yard. A breeze rustled through the fresh row of leaves, and for the first time since the hedge had been cut, the space felt whole again. Not finished, but healing. Neighbors eventually drifted off with tired smiles and promises to check on the saplings tomorrow. Lisa packed up her tools, brushing dirt from her jeans. "City'll be watching the HOA closely now," she said. "This isn't the end of it." Grandpa nodded. "Long as they leave folks be." "They will," Lisa answered. "Or they'll answer for it." As she walked back to her car, Grandpa and I stood side by side facing the new hedge line. Young trees, small, but determined, aligned like soldiers reclaiming a frontier. He exhaled slowly. "Feels different," he said. "Because you took something back," I told him. Grandpa wiped his palms on his jeans. "What happens next?" I looked at the fresh row of saplings, then toward the neighborhood beyond, porches, mailboxes, the distant shimmer of the lake. "Tomorrow," I said, "we fix the HOA too." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks he didn't look afraid of what came next. 6 months later, the hedge line was alive again. The saplings we planted by hand, thin, trembling things back then, had taken root with stubborn determination. Now they stood waist-high, their leaves dense and bright under the late summer sun. The yard felt different with them there, not restored the way it once was, but renewed in a way Grandpa could finally breathe around. I pushed open the back door and stepped into the warm evening air. Grandpa was already outside, standing near the property line with a mug of coffee he no longer needed for warmth. He held it loosely, eyes fixed on the greenery. "They came back quick," he said without turning. "Didn't expect that. They had good soil," I told him. "Good hands planting them, too." He chuckled softly. "Yours were shaking the whole time." Still did the job, I said. A faint rustling caught my attention. A light breeze moved down the row of saplings, brushing their leaves into a gentle wave. The sound had the same quiet comfort the old hedge once gave him. Grandpa lifted his chin, listening to it with a kind of reverence. I unfolded the HOA newsletter in my hand. The paper cracked under the bend it had been in my back pocket all afternoon. A bold headline stretched across the top of the front page. "New permit. Transparency rules adopted." Grandpa raised an eyebrow. "More rules?" "Better ones," I said. "Take a look." I handed it to him. He put on his glasses and scanned the lines slowly, lips moving as he read. "All HOA landscaping actions must include permit numbers. Expiration dates must be published. Homeowner consent required and recorded." He stopped halfway down the page. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "They're posting all this for everyone to see. City made sure of it," I said. "HOA signed off on the changes last week." He studied the page for another moment. "All this because of what they did to my yard, because you didn't let them get away with it," I corrected. "Because you said something when most folks stay quiet." The side gate clicked open and Dotson stepped in carrying a pair of gardening shears he probably grabbed as an excuse to walk over. Behind him came McGill, followed by two newer neighbors who'd moved in just after the hearing. Lisa trailed last, waving with the easy confidence of someone who'd helped the city rewrite half those rules. "You boys admiring the forest?" Dotson asked, nodding toward the saplings. "Give it another year and I'll need a ladder," Grandpa said. Lisa smiled. "A good problem to have." Grandpa handed her the newsletter. "You see, they printed your language almost word for word, I noticed," she said. "Turner said it was overdue." McGill crossed his arms. "Funny how quiet the HOA's been. No more midnight notices, no more surprise view improvements. Seems like they learned something." "Seems like everyone did," I added. Grandpa let out a thoughtful hum. "Never imagined a hedge would shake up the neighborhood." Dotson shook his head. "It wasn't the hedge. It was what they tried to do with it." He pointed at the saplings. "This," he said, "this ain't just plants growing back. It's the line where someone finally told them no." Grandpa didn't answer right away. He stepped closer to the nearest sapling, reached out, and touched a leaf with the pad of his thumb. The leaf bent and sprang back full of life, full of promise. His hand lingered there, gentle, steady. "They're sturdy," he whispered. "Stronger than I expected." "So are you," I said. His eyes glistened in the low orange light of the setting sun. For months after the cut, his shoulders had carried the weight of humiliation, violation, and disbelief. Now, in the quiet glow of the yard, that heaviness seemed to evaporate like mist. "They rewrote the rules because of you," I told him again, softer this time. He looked at me, voice low. "Because of us." The neighbors nodded in agreement. The breeze moved again, pushing the leaves into a soft, even whisper. Lisa folded the newsletter and tapped it lightly with one finger. "This will outlast all of us," she said. "People who move here in 10 years will never know what happened, but they'll live under better rules because of today." Grandpa wiped the corner of his eye. "Feels strange," he said. "Being part of something bigger. Feels right," I replied. The saplings swayed. The sun dipped lower. The last warm light caught the leaves, turning them almost gold. Grandpa took a long breath, let it out, and said what everyone had been thinking since the day they cut down the first hedge. Finally, someone fought back. The evening light hit the new saplings just as the posted city order fluttered on Grandpa's gate, its embossed seal catching a dull gold glow. Standing at the property line, I felt the weight of the old wound ease as the hedge rose again where it had been wrongfully taken. Justice isn't loud. It's steady, printed in ink, posted for all to read, and strong enough to press back against anyone who mocked the rules meant to protect us. And when the neighbors walked over, nodding at the notice and the growing green, I finally understood what this fight had changed. Finally, someone fought back.